The federal government says it will no longer release guiding price bands for the sale of premium motor spirit, popularly called petrol, at filling stations.
Executive Secretary, Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency, Abdul Kadir Saidu, says going forward, PMS price will be determined by the forces of demand and supply and the international cost of crude oil, adding that the downstream arm of the oil and gas sector has been fully deregulated. He also said the role of the agency will be to ensure that all marketers do not profiteer, as every petrol dealer will be free to source for product and fix their price. Mr. Saidu further said that the regulation will be in accordance with the Code of Conduct because as a regulator, it is the duty of PPRA to protect the consumer and operators. Presently, petrol is selling between 159 naira and 167 naira per litre.
An attempt to deregulate the oil sector in 2012 was poorly managed, resulting in over 1 week of protests and rallies. Business and social activities in main cities were held at a spot, and government was forced to abandon the move. Let's bring in oil and gas expert Bala Zakka, who joins us now to discuss the impact of this particular move. Federal government says it's made ₦1 trillion in the past 6 months from the no fuel subsidy regime. With this new development, where it says it will no longer release guiding price bands, do you agree that full deregulation is in full effect?
Well, whether it is in full effect or it is not in full effect, I am just sorry to say that I've been following this chronology in the past 20 years. So everything I will tell you has nothing to do with a particular political party, a particular presidential year, or a particular person. I am talking based on my experience in the oil and gas industry. I'm talking as a chartered accountant, an experienced economist, and also a practicing petroleum engineer. How can an emerging economy or country like Nigeria, where you cannot predict the inflation figures, where the minimum wage is less than $100 per month, where you cannot predict the value of the currency, where you cannot plan because you cannot predict the state of insecurity, where you cannot plan because there are so many confusing things about government policies. How can a country where nearly all the GDP variables are very low, export-import differential is almost negative, where balance of payment is almost negative, where you have a high collection of poor people, prefer to deploy the economic restructuring mechanism of deregulation ahead of liberalization or commercialization on a product that has no substitute? Where does that work? Common elementary economics tells you that you cannot deregulate the price of a product that has no substitute. Petrol has no substitute. Water has substitute. I can decide to go and look for sachet water and drink. I can look for bottled water. I can go and dig a well, get my water from there, purify it and drink. I can go to the river. I can have my own borehole. When you talk about a car, you, apart from petrol, you cannot put palm oil there. You cannot put granite oil in
I get your
car.
point, Mr. Zakka. If I can butt in very quickly, the position of the federal government is such that it has lost 60% in revenue, in the wake of this pandemic. It does sound like it's saying it cannot afford pumping trillions of naira to pay for subsidy. I don't know. Are you saying that we have to revert? Come to think of it, for years now, people would say, oh, perhaps the biggest pocket for corruption is the paying of subsidy in the first place.
Sir, I have a very simple answer for you. When you talk about the pandemic is just was an incident of the last 6 months. And I'm talking to you about the chronology of the last 20 years. In other words, if it has to do, even if you can take 10 years to establish a refinery, you are supposed to have had 2 good brand new refineries. And let me ask you a very simple question, regardless of what anybody tells you. When you talk about subsidy is an economic cushioning mechanism across the global world. When we talk, this is basic, simple definition. But let me take you quickly. To everybody who is listening, and I'm ready to have a global debate with anybody, this is a very simple example. As we speak today, I remember there was a time we were using some Eda Sukuk bond for the construction of our roads. We were looking up to China for maybe help in our railway construction, which means China has some good knowledge of generating revenues more than us. This same China we are talking about has so many state-owned refineries. This same China we are going to look for money and borrow from looked at West Africa and felt many of the West African countries have no crude oil and do not have distillates. What will stop Nigeria to just turn her back and look at these entire West African countries, have her own state refineries, and be the one supplying to all these countries? Just imagine what will happen if we were to have our own depots in each of these West African countries. We will even be having depot managers. Are we saying we are more intelligent than China? Are we more intelligent than Saudi Arabia, that is a friend of Nigeria, is a member of OPEC, but has state-owned functional refineries and has state-owned functional refineries overseas?
I get the point, Mr. Zakka. There are a lot of talks about alternatives to fuel. The Minister of State recently talked about gas. We understand that there are also cars that run by electricity. But let me get your opinion on this. The PPRA also mentioned earlier today that oil marketers are not currently importing petrol because of the scarcity of foreign exchange. What do you think would be the implication of this at this time?
Thank you, and God bless you for that question. If you are suffering from exchange rate differentials, what do? The first thing you need to do is to look at that thing you need to do that will make you not to bother so much about the exchange rate. If we had Nairanized the downstream sector of the economy, the first thing of the oil and gas industry, remember, there is liberalization, commercialization, privatization, and deregulation. On the downstream sector, if we had liberalized it or commercialized it and decided to Nairanize just the downstream, not the upstream, we will get the crude oil from the wellheads within Nigeria in Naira. We will move them to the respective refineries within Nigeria in Naira. We will refine them in Naira. We will distribute them in Naira, make Naira. What that does to you is to save you from that foreign exchange differential that person is talking about. For God's sake, who are our economic planners? Who are our economic thinkers and economic managers? How can you deregulate the price of a product that has no substitute?
Mr. Zakka, I'm afraid we have to go now. Government has insisted that the forces of demand and supply and an international price of crude will now determine how much Nigerians pay for petrol. We must say a big thank you. Oil and gas expert Bala Zakka, thank you for your thoughts on the news tonight.
Oh dear, I pity Nigeria.